One of the pro features of OmniFocus that I find to be well worth the money and that are worth it in and of itself is the ability to create custom perspectives. So one of the things that I do fairly frequently is, and it sometimes depends on what scenario I'm going through, but I will create perspectives depending on the type of work I'm doing, and they can be temporary. But there are a handful of these that I use on a daily basis. They are quite frequent. And ultimately what a perspective is simply a way to look at the data that you have inside of your OmniFocus database so that you can get a different perspective on the information that you have stored inside the application. So true to form, there are a couple different ways that you can go about creating new ones of these. The simplest of these is to simply go to this Perspectives menu and click on Add Perspective, and it will pull up the list of perspectives that are currently in the system, and it allows you to create your new perspective. And then we have it. We have a new perspective created that we can start to tweak and alter. Now, there are two different types of perspectives that you can ultimately create. One is that of the project hierarchy, and the other is that of the context hierarchy. So if I expand this out so that we can get a little bit better view of it, it'll get to a point where we can see everything that's going on here. And if you see the difference there at the top underneath that project hierarchy, one says don't use the project hierarchy, one uses it. It's simply the difference between the project and the contexts. If you want to see your list of contexts in the sidebar versus the list of projects in the sidebar. And depending on what you're doing, if you're planning or working from the perspective that you're creating, it will dictate which of those you want to use. So for example, if we reference, say, my dashboard or the neutralized perspectives that I use, those operate off of the context list because they're working perspectives. And at the same time, the old installed project perspectives that I use, they're during my planning process, making sure everything is cleaned up. So I use the project hierarchy for those. So it just kind of depends on which mindset that you want to be working from whenever you create this new perspective. Now, if you go on down to the next section there for presentation, there are three options here. One is the group actions by. You can see a number of options that allow you to change how your tasks are grouped within that context view. And this is helpful because in most cases, you're going to group them by context because you want to see the list of contexts that you're operating under. Sometimes it's helpful to see them by defer date. When are they coming up to be worked on? See flagged versus not flagged. Just depending on how you want to look at it, that's the groupings that you'll see whenever you create those. So in this case, if I were to click on flagged, and I'm going to double click on this so that I can activate that, you can now see that that particular perspective shows me groupings by the items that I have flagged as well as those that are unflagged. So if I move this over to where we can get a look at it, and then I can alter this to say by changed, now I can see in the background there that those particular tasks are now grouped by the date that I last changed those. And you can continue making alterations to this. There are, again, a lot of different ways that you can group those. And in the same way that you can group them, you can also sort them within those groups. So for example, if I wanted to sort these simply by the name of the task, I can do that just by hitting sort by the name, and then I have all of my tasks in alphabetical order. There are, again, a number of ways that you can do this. If I click on Open in a new window, and then say I, again, double click on that, it will open up a new window for me to operate off of. So I can do a lot of different things with that. Some people like to use that in order to have a today list. They'll open multiple windows, or they want to have one window open where they do a lot of their work, their planning. They want another one open for context or their today list so that they can look at just the items for today. It just kind of depends on how you want to work with it. But there's a lot of options there whenever you have that open in a new window ability. If we move on down here to this layout section, you can use the layout settings that you have in your preferences. That's what I do. For me, I like to keep all of my system very similar. I like to keep it identical to every other view that I'm going to look at. I just like continuity with it. So for me, I use my settings in the preferences. But if you wanted a different view for a given perspective, you can adjust this to the fluid, which is what the one in preferences is. Or I can adjust the custom columns here and start to alter quite a bit of this to where it's very, very dumbed down. So if I switch over to that, you can see how that's a little bit different than what I was looking at as opposed to, say, this fluid layout. So it does give you a little bit different view. It just allows you the option to tweak how it looks and how it operates specific to that view of your tasks. So I'm going to put this back on the use preferences. And then if we go down to the filtering, this is where some of the power of this can really start to come through. So right now, the view in the background there is for my contexts. And right now it's showing me absolutely everything, whether they're available or not. That's why some of them are grayed out and some of them are the full-on black colored text. But if I look at the options that I have underneath the filtering, I can filter by status. And what that status tells me is which of the types of tasks that I want inside this list. If I only wanted to see flag tasks, I can set that to flag. I only have one available there. If I want all of my unflagged tasks, I could do that as well so that anything that I don't have a flag on can show up. And you can see how this goes on down the list and you can get pretty sophisticated with it. One that I see a lot of people use fairly frequently is due or flagged. So if you have a due date or the item is flagged, it will show up on that list. That's one that we'll get to in another video as well. So go check out the dashboard video to understand that one a little bit more. If I put this back to any status and then we go down to the availability section here, this is where there's a little bit of flexibility here as well. The current list is showing me absolutely everything that's remaining. It's only the items that have not been checked off. Whether they're currently available or not, it's only items that have not been checked off. But if I only want to see the ones that are next up in the list, I can get rid of all of those that are simply remaining and get a look at just the items that have the ability to be worked on right now. And this is really helpful whenever you have sequential projects in your system because you're going to have items that are blocked by other tasks that need to be completed before you can get to them. And this allows you to only see the ones that are at the top of that list. And in the same way, sometimes you'll have projects where they have multiple items that are available and you only want to see the one at the very top. You can do that as well. So again, there's a lot of flexibility here. You can get a look at absolutely everything, including the items that have been checked off, or you can take a look at only the items that have been checked off. Again, you can fine-tune this down as far as you want. So if we set that back to remaining, and then go down to duration, this is where the estimated time piece can come in really handy. Again, I don't use this ever in my system. Some people love it. I simply have never gotten into it, but if you insert estimated times into a lot of your tasks, you can again filter down by the ones that are a certain duration so that you can see just the ones that are short or just the long ones. It just kind of depends on how you want to look at it. Much in the same way that you can filter the tasks by whether or not they're remaining or available, you can do the same thing with the lists of contexts in the sidebar. So if I were to click on active, it would get rid of any of the tasks, any of the contexts that don't have an active tasks in them. So it's just another way to clean up your list. You can look at just the stalled ones with stalled tasks in them. Again, there's quite a bit of flexibility there. For me, I just like seeing the full list just to keep it simple, so I don't ever really get into it a whole lot. The last one in this filtering section is find text. And this is handy if you want to use, say, two different contexts for, say, agendas and waiting items, but you want to be able to search for a person across those two contexts. This is helpful to do that. Or if I want to search for a specific book in this case. So if I wanted to search for, say, willpower, and I put that in there, it will only show me the tasks that have willpower in that task in some form. So again, there's a lot of flexibility there as well. The next section down here is focus, and this is one that I don't use a lot, but I do on occasion. But what it allows you to do is focus this particular perspective to a specific folder or a specific project inside of your system. So if I wanted to focus on just my guidance folder, then I can apply that to the focus and get only the tasks that apply to that particular folder. And I could do the same in multiples of these. You can add multiple of these to your focus, and you can see how they build up down here. So it again allows you to fine-tune how you're looking at these. There was one perspective I used for a little while that I just called waiting that it focused on just my agendas and my waiting context. And then I could apply a search to that so that it would again allow me to search for just the items I'm waiting on other people to find, and then narrow it down to that specific person. So if I pull these off, clear this out, the last section down here is this sidebar selection. So if I switch over to the main screen here and I select Horizons, Read, and Learn, and then we come back to this view, it now allows me to click on that button, Add Current Sidebar Selection. So if I click on that and scroll down here, you can see that it has now added those 3 to that list. So if I switch back over to the main screen here and I click on Projects, I'm going to switch back over to this Perspectives list, and then I'm going to double click on this. And what it does is it maintains the selection I have on the list. So it doesn't focus it, it doesn't narrow it down to that, but it at least allows me to just see those that I've selected. So there's a little bit of a difference there, not much, but it is a slight difference between the two. Now, one last thing that I did not mention is if I come back to this screen and we go up to the top of this, one, you can name it. So at the very top, I can change what this name is. You can also change what your icon is for it. So if you notice, I can change that to a calendar icon, and then if you notice over here on the side, it does change it in the sidebar as well. But another one that I do fairly frequently for my most common ones is record a shortcut. And for me, I like to use Control Option and whatever letter I like to use. So I use that Control Option as kind of my main OmniFocus indicator. I don't know why, it's just the way it's worked out for me. So you can assign a keyboard shortcut to that. And if I were to go back over to this main screen again, say I'm on Projects, and I hit Control Option N, it will pull up that perspective in exactly the way that I've left it. And something else you'll notice here is if I again go back to this Projects perspective, that new perspective that I created leaves the sidebar. It doesn't stay there. If I wanted it to stay there, I can come back to this Perspectives view and click on the little star icon, and now it will stay in that sidebar. And that allows me to come down here and then I can just click on it. Just another easy way to get to that perspective. So again, there's a lot of flexibility here, and you can really create a very custom view of how you want to see your given tasks. But that's all from the context view. If we switch this over to the project view, a lot of this is the same. You can still group projects in a lot of the same ways that you would with context. Again, you can sort them. Again, you can do the open and new view. Also with the layout, you can still do the custom layout. All of the filtering works the same, and the focus and the sidebar selection, it all works the same. It's just applying it to projects instead of context. So again, it's all the same process. It's just a matter of how you go about choosing which view you want to work from and how you come at the mindset of how you want to operate with the tasks in your system.